Nothing fancy.
I understand. Nothing fancy.
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're reviewing Dune Part 2. Although we will touch upon a few plot points already revealed in the trailers, we'll otherwise be keeping this review spoiler-free.
He who can destroy a thing has the real control of it.
Part 1 might have been omitted from the title, but Denis Villeneuve's first Dune picture was only the beginning.
This is only the beginning.
Splitting up the source material was integral to adapting Frank Herbert's dense novel. Yet Dune didn't feel like an incomplete picture. It immersed us in the universe Herbert created, juggling world building, character introductions, and a grand story.
Bless the Maker and his water. Bless the coming and going of him. May his passage cleanse the world and keep the world for his people.
That said, Villeneuve was indeed just dipping his toes in the sand. With Dune Part 2, he summons the sandworm and hooks us in for a spectacular ride. Despite not drastically changing the setting, Villeneuve has made a follow-up that's every bit as visually invigorating as its predecessor. It's in the narrative where Part 2 exceeds Part 1, taking us to deeper, more complex places.
If you dive in, you can't reach the bottom.
You dive in.
Yes, it's called swimming.
I don't believe you.
The film picks up where we left off, as Paul Atreides, Timothee Chalamet, and Lady Jessica, Rebecca Ferguson, seek refuge with the Fremen.
You're one of us now. A life for a life. Come with us to Sitz-Tavern.
Some, like Javier Bardem's Stilgar, see Paul as a messiah. Others see a false prophet whose life will inevitably be claimed by the desert. We've seen the Chosen One archetype in countless stories, with Paul Atreides sometimes being a go-to example. Many have grown tired of this trope, especially when it runs the risk of venturing into white savior territory.
It's not a prophecy, it's a story.
Dune Part 2 fortunately avoids these pitfalls, developing Paul into an anti-hero of sorts rather than a clean-cut savior. This amounts to a more compelling journey for those who haven't read the books, leaving them to question if Paul is the one.
I don't care what you believe, I believe.
Even if the prophecies are true, Dune Part 2 takes a page from Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ, showing that even a chosen one can have the imperfections that come with humanity. We could see why people would follow Paul into battle.
Do you believe in Paul?
There are signs.
Even as he comes into his power, though, we understand why others would remain doubtful. The story spotlights Paul's merciful and diplomatic side, but something darker lurks underneath. It's not a question of whether Paul will accept his role as Messiah.
I see possible futures all at once. And in so many futures, our enemies prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
It's whether he'll lead his followers to prosperity, misuse his influence over others, or land somewhere in the middle. Chalamet does an exceptional job of capturing Paul's nuanced facets in a performance that ranges from quiet to commanding.
Consider what you're about to do, Paul Atreides.
Silence!
This is just as much Zendaya's show.
It's okay. I'm here. It's been a while since you've had one of those nightmares. Tell me, what was it about?
It's only fragments.
After only being teased in the first picture, Zendaya stands tall as Chani, who is elevated above simply being Paul's love interest. Paul and Chani do have a natural chemistry, leading to some of the film's most likable exchanges. Romance isn't the only thing at stake, however. Zendaya turns in some of her most layered work as a woman torn between the one she loves and her unyielding beliefs.
I won't be fighting for him. I'm fighting for my people.
While Chani isn't afraid to speak her mind, there are some equally powerful moments where she forces herself to hold her tongue. These characters might find themselves in extraordinary situations, but Dune Part 2 is surprisingly genuine in its portrayal of relationships, especially when religion and politics enter the mix.
Your blood comes from dukes and great houses. Here, we're equal. What we do for the benefit of all.
Well, I'd very much like to be equal to you.
Maybe I'll show you the way.
Although Chalamet and Zendaya are at the movie's core, Dune is the definition of an ensemble piece. Ferguson, one of our most underrated actresses, takes Lady Jessica to increasingly fascinating places.
We gave them something to hope for.
Stellan Skarsgård continues to have a ball as the Baron, while Dave Bautista reminds us there's much more to him than Drax. Part 2 also makes way for newcomers like Austin Butler, who erases all traces of his Elvis voice to play the sinister Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen.
Feyd-Rautha, he's psychotic.
The film may leave you wanting more of certain players, namely Florence Pugh as Princess Irulan, although that's what we have sequels for.
In the shadows of Arrakis lie many secrets, but the darkest of them all may remain.
For now, virtually everyone fits the bill. Even Christopher Walken restrains some of his usual Walkenisms, delivering an effective performance as Emperor Shaddam IV.
Your father was a weak man.
Once again tying it all together is Denis Villeneuve.
With Dune Part 2, Denis brings his full vision to life.
Visionary director is a phrase that's often tossed around too liberally, although it's hard to think of a better way to describe Villeneuve. Herbert's novel has been called unfilmable for various reasons. Villeneuve not only puts that debate to rest, but he's molded Arrakis into a locale that feels inhabitable.
You can see there's so much joy in him every time he comes to work. That passion invigorates us all.
We've now spent 2 movies on a planet dominated by sand with limited colors. On paper, you wouldn't think that would lend itself to a visually interesting experience. The characters even talk about how they'd like to escape Arrakis in pursuit of paradise. While Villeneuve doesn't shy away from Arrakis' bleak, unforgiving nature, every shot is breathtaking, unearthing the desert's unusual beauty.
It's breathtaking.
Will Villeneuve receive a Best Director nomination from the Academy after shockingly going overlooked last time?
He said
I got that. Thanks.
If Villeneuve is ignored again, it'll only intensify his reputation as the next Christopher Nolan, Dune being his Dark Knight trilogy. Like Nolan, the Academy may be slow to fully embrace Villeneuve, but he's among the few modern directors making movies that need to be experienced on the biggest screen possible. Dune Part 2 is sure to draw parallels to sequels like The Empire Strikes Back and The Two Towers.
So it begins.
The discussion shouldn't be restricted to the sci-fi and fantasy genres. Villeneuve has made a film in the tradition of classic Hollywood epics, a genre thought to be extinct until now. Certain moments warrant comparison to the chariot race in Ben-Hur or the parting of the Red Sea in the Ten Commandments. Lawrence of Arabia is another inevitable example, and not just because both films have the desert in common. We often talk about how movies exist to transport us. Whether watching T.E. Lawrence trek across a desert or Paul Atreides ride a sandworm, both films practically invite the viewer into the screen with their massive scope. With a large scale comes a lengthy runtime, but even at just under 3 hours, Dune Part 2 doesn't feel overstuffed. The screenplay, which Villeneuve co-wrote with John Spates, keeps the plot moving with a balance of spectacle and conversations that are just as absorbing.
It's bigger and better than I'd ever imagined.
Although ultimately faithful to the source material, a handful of notable plot points are absent. As promised before, we won't give away anything major. Let's just say that while some elements may be missed, Villeneuve knew what to cut for the most part. As much as we make fun of David Lynch's Dune, it's not like Herbert's novel was without a few goofy ideas that worked well enough on the printed page but just don't translate well to film.
My brother is coming with many Fremen warriors.
Dune Part 2 does what every adaptation should, remaining true to its roots without being bound to every word as if it were sacred text. In that sense, this is the best Dune adaptation we could have asked for, even if it's only the beginning.
This is a form of power that our world has not yet seen, the ultimate power.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. While Villeneuve has done the first book justice, you can sense an eagerness to dig into Dune Messiah.
Because all my visions lead to horror.
Because you lose control.
Because I gain it.
Only time will tell if Villeneuve returns to direct a third Dune picture, although he's reportedly been working on a script. Until then, Villeneuve has more than satisfied our appetites with two of the most awe-inspiring and thought-provoking blockbusters of recent years, elevated by Hans Zimmer's all-encompassing score.
My allegiance is to you.
Dune Part 2 outdoes Part 1, while leaving room for Villeneuve to take this material to even more ambitious places. If this momentum is sustained, Dune will go down as one of cinema's most treasured franchises, with this second chapter standing out as another essential silver screen watch. WatchMojo is giving Dune Part 2 a 9.5 out of 10. Are you excited for Dune Part 2?
You are not prepared for what is to come.
Are there any other upcoming movies you'd like us to review? Let us know in the comments. Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.